Thank you for tuning in. I wanted to take just a couple minutes before tomorrow and talk a bit about Israel. I heard from some of you that were a little disappointed that I had not said more about the war in Israel last Sunday. I also heard from some of you who said, I don't show up to hear a pastor who's been to Israel a few times and thinks he's an expert give geopolitical advice or counsel, so stay in your lane. In light of that, I did want to take just a couple minutes and offer some pastoral coaching about how you might think about what's going on in Israel. It's been a really difficult couple weeks. It feels like a fragile moment. It feels like lots of people are exhausted, and it's obviously the biggest issue right now is the war in Israel. But I mean, hey, there's a war in Ukraine, and there's been a massive earthquake in Afghanistan, and then there's all kinds of challenges in other parts of the world, the fires in Maui, and you think of the dysfunction in Congress, and you've got a border crisis. There's just all kinds of things going on at sort of a national and international level. And then there's just the challenges that you're facing and the challenges that I'm facing, which you put all of that together, and it can be a bit overwhelming. So I want to acknowledge that, even as I sort of push on how we are to think about what is going on in the Middle East right now. So I doubt I have to say anything to you about this, but just over a week ago, there was a surprise attack by Hamas, a terrorist attack on parts of Israel, and on a major holiday, they sort of swooped in and seemed to have deliberately targeted families and women and children and infants and the elderly. And a lot of this was filmed, and it was then filmed so that it could be displayed, and it sort of had a completely different kind of dynamic to it. So let me just note, war is horrible. It is full of heinous acts of brutality, and I don't want to suggest otherwise. But over the years, there has been this idea, just war theory and the Geneva Convention and other things, about wars being focused on combatants and that you try to minimize civilian casualties. And this particular attack seems to have targeted the vulnerable, and to do so in a way that has been uniquely horrifying. So just to be clear, I support Israel's right to respond to the attacks. I'm not an Israel right or wrong guy. As I read through the Old Testament, it seems to me that God is, through the prophets, always trying to correct and police the behavior of his people, just as he tries to correct and police our behavior. And so I think that, again, I'm not an Israel right or wrong guy, but I think the response to the attack, in light of just war theory and other things, I think it is right, no, it is appropriate. Weakness seems to invite aggression. Civilizations are fragile. I wish it wasn't this way, but obviously there needs to be in this day's police, there needs to be armies, there needs to be other responses. My question, what I'm wrestling with, is how do I respond? And I want to suggest 5 things. First of all, I think the first right response is tears. It is to have a broken heart. I have not watched a lot of the news about this. I've read a number of things. I've tried to avoid some of the most horrific pictures. I'm simply, honestly trying to guard my own heart against the kind of trauma and the kind of cynicism that can develop. And so I've tried to limit my intake. I don't think we need all the news that we get. And so I've tried to learn enough to know what's going on, but not to sort of swim in this. But I know enough to say these are horrific things. There's a lot of people who are suffering. And one of the first responses is to cry, and it's to cry out to God. Secondly, I want to encourage you to trust. I want you to place your trust in God. I want you to not be anxious about this. God is not surprised, and he is in control. And we are told repeatedly that we should not be surprised when we encounter troubles. It's not if we encounter troubles, it's when we encounter troubles. And so I want to say, if you are in Christ, right, then we have no ultimate fears. This ends well. God wins, his kingdom comes, his will be done. We look forward to that day. So I want to try and remove the ultimate anxiety about this that you might be feeling. Third, I want to encourage you to avoid hate in general and anti-Semitism in particular. We are called to love people. We are called to love even our enemies. And there's so much division and tribalism and hate, and so much of this gets directed throughout history. It has been directed at the Jewish people, God's chosen people. And we could go into some of the theological reflections on this and other things. I just simply want to note that we need to stand against hatred. That is not what we are called to do. And so I think that we have got to stand against the anti-Semitic kind of undertone that we're seeing in different parts of the world. And I think also we've got to be alert to the suffering that is going to be going on for the Palestinian people. Not all Palestinian people are supporting Hamas, including all the Palestinians living in Gaza are not supporting Hamas. So they have been tremendously underserved and disserved by the leadership there. And it's obviously a complicated situation, but there are people of good intentions who are caught in really tragic situations with young kids or elderly parents, or they're trying to figure out how they're going to navigate the war that is coming. I'm filming this on Friday afternoon. I have no idea when the next phase of this war is going to happen, but we need to stand against the kind of blanket hatred that extends in every direction. Number 4, we need to be preparing to help. I mentioned that I have friends there. Christ Church has been involved with various ministries there over the years. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Obviously, the people of Israel are going to need help. There's going to be lots of different ways that we can get involved there. There's going to be a humanitarian crisis, I suspect, that is going to hit the Gaza area. There's just going to be lots of need for God's people to be the hands and feet of God at this moment, and we're trying to figure out specifically what that might look like. And then the last thing that I'll say, and this could easily have been the first thing that I said, is that we need to respond by praying. Yesterday, a couple days ago, I sent out a notice that we were going to have a special prayer meeting for Israel. Psalm 122:6 says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem." We had a prayer time yesterday, and I spent my time praying in particular for the leaders. 2 Timothy 2 tells us to do this. There are men and women in leadership positions right now in the midst of the fog of war who are dealing with hostage situations and all kinds of decisions that are life or death decisions. And I can't imagine that. I think we need to be praying for President Biden. We need to be praying for Secretary Blinken. We need to be praying for the Israeli government that is now, it's a unified government that has come together in this time of war like they did 50 years ago, the Yom Kippur War. There's lots of other leaders. There's leaders throughout the Middle East who could be voices of peacekeeping. The Bible tells us, blessed are the peacemakers, not just the peacekeepers, but the peacemakers. And so I am praying that peacemakers will rise up and there can be ways that this war can be ended. It's a fragile moment. I think we're foolish if we don't recognize that there's all kinds of disruption in the geopolitical realm. Other players could move forward. I want to encourage you again. God is God. He is sovereign. He's in control. There's opportunities for us to do the right thing. I want to encourage you to guard your hearts, to let them be soft, to lament the tragedies that we're seeing around the world, and then to be prepared, not just to pray, but to pray, and then also to help in other ways. I hope to see you tomorrow.